Do you ever have that one thing that no matter what, you hold on to hope that it'll eventually get better? That one thing that eventually will prevail and come out on top? As a Manchester United fan, I feel this way too often, but in recent months I'm starting to feel the same way about my favourite cinematic universe, the MCU. I've made so many videos ripping this universe to shreds, and I kinda feel bad. I don't want to be known as the guy that just hates on the MCU, but seriously, when they give me this, I can't just let it go ignored. So yes, today we're finally talking about She-Hulk as a whole. I've alluded to it in my other videos, but since the show is finally finished, I'm going to talk about it in bulk. I just want to note though, that despite the comedic elements that may appear in this video, I really want this to be a critical discourse of the show and really delve deep into why I don't like it and some of the problems I have with it. So without further ado, let's get into this. So I'm really going to be splitting this video up into three main sections. The first section will focus on the writing aspect, the second section will focus on the filmmaking, and the third section will go into the finale and why it just didn't work for me. But first, let's talk about the show's concept. I want to talk about the concept for the show because I think it really matters what they had down on paper. On paper, this show is actually really good. It's surprisingly creative in comparison to some of the other films and shows they've put out. And in comparison to the stuff they've done in Phase 4 so far, She-Hulk had the potential to be the most creative and jaw-dropping in some instances. A self-aware show about lawyers and Hulks, that sounds great. She-Hulk had some great concepts and ideas. Like the fact that we've never had an MCU character break the fourth wall before, or the fact that we haven't been able to delve deep into what it means to be a Hulk in the MCU ever since Avengers 1. And because Universal owns the distribution rights to a Hulk film, Bruce Banner and co have been restricted to side characters ever since. She-Hulk was a show that could have redeemed this aspect. And in fairness, they do explore the idea of Jen balancing being a raging monster and a normal person, but it just feels flat. I'll be returning to how I think the show went downhill beforehand in the writer's room, even before production started later on in the video. But after that small little segment on my opinion towards the concept, let's move on to the writing. So let's talk about Jen's story arc as a whole. Jen learning how to balance her life as a superhero and Jen Walters as a lawyer at the same time. She has to come to grips with the fact that she is a superhero and there is nothing else she can do to change that. This is great, but in execution, the show really rushes this arc. There are minor consequences that plague Jen's life, like her getting fired or She-Hulk getting hated on by the media, but then it's constantly overshadowed by the next comedic and light-hearted interaction between Jen and one of her many friends. I'm not saying the show should just have Jen be alone for the major duration of the time, but it feels like Jen never has nothing left. The idea that the media turns against her, the idea that she has to balance her now new complicated life isn't played on enough. If she loses her apartment, no problem. She's got like 50 lawyer friends, her parents, her tailor, Abomination's retreat, and Matt Murdock to turn to. If she loses her job, no problem. She'll just get one working at a superhero law division. If the press hates She-Hulk, so what? I guess she'll just be She-Hulk anyway. There was no jeopardy. There was no feeling of doubt, of dread, like Jen was going to lose and be all alone. The concepts and ideas that were put on paper had the potential to explore a Jennifer Walters that had absolutely nothing left. A Jennifer Walters that had the perfect life that gets ripped to shreds because she becomes a Hulk. This is what they tried to go for, but it just doesn't work. The writers soften the blows to Jen's life and cushion her between all of these other people she can rely on. The tragedy of Jen is something that they could have homed in on. Surprisingly, as cliche as it might sound, the concept of a superhero life severely interfering with your personal life in more ways than one is something that can be effective if done right. And I don't think it was done right. Not to mention, the dialogue is horrendous. Dialogue in film is something that's hard to get right. When I write scripts, dialogue is one of my weak points. It's incredibly difficult to not overexpose yourself to exposition or overtelling. I guess fourth wall breaking does hold a lot of exposition, so I can give it a pass because that's the point of fourth wall breaking. But the issue is that She-Hulk as a whole is full of expository exports to move the show along, when they can do so much more. Not to mention, if we dive deeper into Jen's character as a whole, we could have spent more scenes with just the characters, exploring their emotions, what they're going through. Not to mention, this has been done with a fourth wall breaking character before. Deadpool made this work whilst also being a comedic fourth wall breaker. Or, on the other side of things, they could have just scrapped the whole adding depth to the character completely and just go all in on the fact that this is a comedy that uses fourth wall break. Just want to clear something up here. When I say no depth, I don't mean that quite literally. The show and the characters can still have depth without taking itself seriously, but I feel like She-Hulk was on the fence with the themes that it wanted to portray, but the show that it also wanted to be at the same time. And I feel like the depth that they were trying to add to the characters really didn't work, and eventually just came off cheap and lazy, because all they wanted to do was be a comedy that broke the fourth wall. So my point is, go either way, and then add depth to the characters, instead of trying to add an emotional theme that adds depth to characters that clearly doesn't work with how the show is being handled. Obviously, like I said, Deadpool did this pretty well, but She-Hulk really didn't. Anyway, back to the video. They tainted the line between a sitcom and trying to give the character something serious. They could have gone either way, but stayed on the fence. This, I think, caused a lot of the issues I have within the show. There was no tender care, it almost felt like it was rushed. I've spoke very generally about the writing, but there is no one specific example I can use that really solidifies my argument, because the whole show is like this. I will say though, the actors did a great job considering the material they were given, especially Titania Maslany and Charlie Cox. Them two were just both incredible. This brings me on to the next crucial part of She-Hulk's downfall, which is more to do with the filmmaking side of things, which is that it has uninspiring visuals. God, I don't think I've seen a Disney Plus Marvel show or any Marvel thing look so bland, uninspiring, and straight up like it came from a production line in my entire life. I really hate saying this because I know that the team behind this show put all of their effort in, but in comparison to the rest of the shows that have come from Disney Plus, the cinematography is bland, the shots are desaturated, and there's nothing that would distinguish the show from having its own style. Real quick, I just want to compare this to another show that recently came out, Ms. Marvel. Ms. Marvel is a show that spiced up its cinematography and colour and used it to its advantage. Let's take a look at two shots from both of these shows side by side and see how they both hold up. The shot on the left is from Ms. Marvel, and the shot on the right is from She-Hulk. I also want to note that there isn't any dependent variable when it comes to both of these shots. These are two random shots taken from both shows. And now someone might say, well, it's unfair to compare a shot that is bad from one show and a shot that's good from another show, because I'm sure you could do it the other way round. But just to note that this shot comparison is here to inform a generalization I have about both shows across all of the episodes. The shot from Ms. Marvel utilizes color and framing perfectly. The blue atmos creates a nice silhouette of the two characters, which are centered by the rule of thirds and are to the right of the screen, which immediately draws the eye to them. This also allows Ms. Marvel's purple shield to stand out, as it's a bright pink on a steamy blue background. This draws the eye very well as well. Dirtying up the frame with vehicles on the left creates a good sense of depth of field to the shot as well. And this is just a simple shot that I grabbed from the show. It's not even that complex, but you can see how much care has been put into it. The lighting, the visuals, everything. She-Hulk does have some of these basic traits, but when you compare this random shot with something like this, it makes the Ms. Marvel shot look revolutionary. Whoever's idea was to put She-Hulk and Hulk, two green characters, in a tropical jungle where the main palette for the variety of sequences would be green. Hey man, I just want to talk. But come on man, She-Hulk just blends into this background. Out of the corner of your eye, if it wasn't for her hair, you wouldn't even be able to tell a character was stood center frame. Now I know this isn't for the whole show, but this is the basics. The character and the focus of the shot doesn't stand out in the way it should, in the way that She-Hulk deserves it to. There is also no experimental and funky camera movement or angles. It's all basic. And also, on a quick side note, I just want to talk about the editing real quick. It is absolutely awful. All I need to say is watch that first fight scene at the end of episode 1, and Jesus Christ, if you know, you know. Overall, the show's cinematography was uninspiring and lazy. Almost like it was rushed and was on a factory chain. Let's move on to the finale. Since the show finished, that has been the biggest talking point. Plus, I think I summarized my thoughts on the entire show throughout the first half of this video. Although, one quick note, I will say I did enjoy parts of episode 7 and 8 a lot more than the others. I felt like it was a decent enough quality, and I thought they were more compact than the first 6. But still, that doesn't save it. Anyway, on to the finale. Let's talk about that fourth wall break, shall we? I see many people calling the decisions made genius. I see many people saying that She-Hulk is masterful at calling out the MCU trolls and is so self-aware. Listen, I'll say this once. Just because She-Hulk is self-aware and can comment on social discourses put forth Marvel Studios' way in the past couple of years does not make it good. When the bare-bone criticisms that are forwarded towards the studio, like bad writing, underdone CGI, and the formulaic nature are all executed in She-Hulk itself, doesn't mean the show gets any merit for calling out the people who criticize this stuff in other MCU projects. Now, if She-Hulk had been a half-decent show and then had subverted expectations and then called out the audience for hating on Marvel Studios and criticizing it too early, then I would sort of get why they did it. But at the same time, She-Hulk also executed all of the criticisms that people already have for Marvel Studios since they are rushing out projects. However, I don't want people to get me wrong. I actually really rate this idea. I think that the fourth wall break at the end of the show was neat in its own little niche way. That She-Hulk can confront Marvel Studios themselves. Like I said, I like the idea. I think it was very different and quite cool. But through execution, it doesn't really work that well. My main issue with this sequence at the end of the show is that it's deliberately calling out the writers for making poor writing decisions. And as I said, this does not excuse the fact that the show as a whole beforehand had bad writing. Something is really off here and I don't like it. It all seems a bit rushed. I've alluded to this idea subtly throughout the video, saying that things look rushed or lazy. From the expository script to the lame and uninspiring visuals and clearly rushed CGI, almost as if this wasn't meant to be the finished product. And maybe She-Hulk is more of a representation and critical downfall for Marvel Studios as a brand than it is for the writers and the character. The whole thing feels just rushed, like the script had been pushed to completion when it wasn't ready, like the visuals were boring and stale because they didn't have time to come up with creative ways to visually tell the story. And the CGI, well, I mean, look at it. It is rushed. Now, I know I'm speculating, but Marvel Studios, if given time, is capable of something magical, just like Infinity War. And with the constant supply and demand from the Disney Plus shows, and with reports circulating about Kevin Feige being spread too thin, whatever that means, I'm led to believe that She-Hulk is a victim of Marvel Studios' production line. It's bad because the MCU couldn't let it be good. Going back to the fourth wall break, it felt as if that was a last-ditch effort to make it seem like the show was worth it. It was made to seem like they wanted to tell the audience that they knew what they came out with wasn't what it could have been, and had She-Hulk retrospectively call the writers out on their own show's ending. I know it's only a theory, but it kind of all makes sense when you think about it. At least that's how I see the finale of the show. She-Hulk was rushed, but the ending was a plea for help, a ploy to get the people to think that the show was bad because the writers wanted it to be. Like it was the point. Well, what role do we play as an audience? We saw the bait and we took it. Many people excited and jaw-droppingly amazed by what the show managed to pull off. I see right through it though. Just because the ending was 10 times more creative than the rest of the show doesn't mean that the first 8 episodes can be excused for being bad. Now, maybe you have some other interpretation of that ending. Maybe you think that that ending was genius and masterful, and if you've got a reason to why you think that, let me know in the comment section down below. But in my opinion, in my view, I feel like the show tries too hard to call itself out to make it look like it being bad was the point. But it doesn't stop there. Even after the show's final act had ended, it carried on making bad choices. Hulk's son, why? Matt Murdock is back, why? What, because She-Hulk said so? What happens in Secret Wars or Kang Dynasty and her entire family and friends are at risk from a multiversal fiery death? Can't she just tell the writers to take Kang out? Can't she just tell the writers to create a new universe? There's so many problems that She-Hulk comes with in the future. And before you say, well, Deadpool fourth wall breaks, yeah, well, never to that extent. And I know that fourth wall break was a play on that panel from the comic books where She-Hulk comes through it. But looking at all of this from a critical film standpoint, how the hell is the tonality, fourth wall breaks, and our ability to use this power going to work going forward? It really baffles me. It really does. In conclusion, I really wanted She-Hulk to be good, but it wasn't. It failed. But I sort of don't blame the writers, nor Kevin Feige. I sort of blame Disney. I feel as though Marvel was not savoring their resources, then She-Hulk would have benefited from so much higher quality, more valuable production time, and a better script. More tender and care. I can't defend this show. I really can't. But if you like it, fine. I would like you to tell me in the comment section down below why you like it, and for what reasons you think the finale is good in any sort of way. Because I'm really looking at reasons to try and defend this show. I'm really looking at reasons to try and give it any sort of gratification for what it was. But to be honest, this is close to being the last straw. Because yeah, She-Hulk really broke me. Thanks for watching this video essay. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit that like button. Also, we're so close to 20,000 subscribers, so if you enjoyed this video and like video essay content, then make sure to hit that subscribe button so you do not miss another video as soon as it comes out on the channel. And I'm losing my voice, but thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one. Take care, and peace.